I watched Amazon spend millions of dollars building the exact same product twice. Two different engineering teams burning cash for months, completely unaware the other existed until launch day. That's the reality inside big tech. It's honestly chaos, and it's exactly why these companies are throwing billions at artificial intelligence. But while the headlines themselves scream about an AI revolution, the reality on the inside is very different. So I spent 12 years inside Amazon, and the last 4 of those 12 years I spent as a product manager. The job was to build the internal tools to fix this chaos. And in the middle of all that inefficiency, guess what didn't happen? AI didn't replace entire departments. It didn't automate the business, but what it did was help people like me basically stay sane. But now the hype is crashing. We are entering what the industry is calling the Trough of Disillusionment. The promises of the last few years are colliding with the reality that this technology is actually fundamentally flawed. Because it lies, it breaks, and most companies honestly can't figure out how to use it effectively. So if you're trying to figure out exactly what AI means for your career, you need to understand what's actually happening on the inside. And today, you're in luck because I'm cutting through the noise. So I'm going to show you exactly how I used AI as a product manager, the internal systems that actually deliver value, and the catastrophic failure of implementation, and the honest, non-sugar-coated truth about AI and your job. But unfortunately, it's just my opinion. But let's get into it. So before we talk about AI, I think we need to talk about the chaos and why AI is even necessary. Because in my opinion, it's not about innovation. It's really about survival. Amazon itself operates on the principle of a decentralized autonomy. You may have heard of the famous 2 pizza teams. This structure, it allows Amazon to move incredibly fast, but it does have some devastating side effects. One of those being fragmentation, because the biggest expense in big tech isn't actually the technology. It's the time wasted trying to figure out how to find the right person or the right information or just the right teams and partnerships to be able to deliver on what your product or project is. This is where you as a PM could actually become more of a detective than a product development person. I myself as a senior product manager, my job wasn't just to build products, it was to be a detective, as strange as that sounds. In my role developing internal tools for logistics, tracking metrics from Asia to Europe to North America, I actually spent only about 40% of my time actually defining the product. The other 60% of my time was spent navigating bureaucracy. It was hunting through thousands of internal wikis, slacking random engineers, hoping they might actually know of who owned a specific API or database, and trying to get different departments to agree on basic definitions. I can't stress on the trying to get people to agree on things, because when you have so many people siloed in different levels of the organization, they come up with their own definitions and standards for things that might not be critical to systems, but they might be critical to you. Go figure. To give you an example, what does on time mean? Does it mean when the driver scans the package or when the customer confirms the receipt? Because different teams track it differently. Aligning them was like trying to figure out an archaeological dig. And this leads me to organizational amnesia. This fragmentation is something that I like to call organizational amnesia. In high-pressure environments, turnover is real. When a senior PM leaves, they take years of context, the why behind the decisions that they made, and they take those with them, and this knowledge isn't in a database. It's inside their head or buried in a deprecated wiki page that no one actually reads. This is actually one of the things that I constantly saw. Let's say we have a new team and they spin up a project. Now, they may be completely unaware that another team actually tried the exact same thing 3 years ago, and they failed for very specific reasons. Instead of learning from their mistakes, they repeat these mistakes, burning millions of dollars and thousands of engineering hours. Which brings me to the AI promise. This was the environment that AI was dropped into. The promise of generative AI wasn't to replace the engineers or the PMs, it was to be this universal translator, maybe like a corporate historian or something. It was supposed to connect the dots that humans couldn't see. But this is where, when you're implementing something like that at scale, that vision at scale, this is where kind of fantasy met reality. So how did we actually use AI? In my experience, it happened in two phases. The first phase was basically personal productivity, and then the second phase was implementation. As a PM, you are constantly context switching. I started using external tools like ChatGPT and Claude very early on, and it became this kind of cognitive exoskeleton. And here's what that looked like in practice. If you know, Amazon is a document machine. The company itself runs on writing. There's this thing called the famous 6-pager and PR and FAQ pages. These can be very demanding. I used AI to sharpen arguments and identify these logical gaps within my own papers and draft the initial structures. It was like having a tireless, brutally honest intern. Now, before AI, my drafts were almost always rejected the first time I submitted them. Now, with AI, my acceptance rate skyrocketed, went through the roof. It improved because I was preempting objections. Then there was the instant analyst. Instead of wasting hours on places like Stack Overflow and trying to figure out complex SQL or Excel queries, I'd ask the AI, and it just gave me the answer. It taught me the methodology behind it, and it really leveled up my skill set instantly. Instead of spending hours looking for the answer, it just gave it to me. The other thing that was really cool is it became a strategic sparring partner. And this to me, especially in my profession, was crucial. So I would feed the AI my proposal and say something like, act as a skeptical VP. I want you to poke holes in this. Why would you say no to this proposal? And those are the things that opened up in-depth conversations about things that I didn't see because I was too close to the document itself. And let me tell you, you'll be writing for hours at Amazon because you have to meet a deadline, and not having the person available to be able to proofread it or be your skeptical voice, that person is also busy. So using AI to put that into place really made it easier for documents to move faster in the process. So it increased your productivity. And then there was the phase 2 of all of this. And phase 2 was the rollout of internal AI tools. This is where things really got complicated. And I can't share any proprietary IP, but the core technology used is widely known as Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG. Now, RAG is essential. It allows the AI to search internal documents and databases before answering a question, and it grounds the AI in the internal reality. The most effective implementation of that feature is what I like to call personas. I cannot stress to you how amazing it was for me to create a persona, because I could upload all of my product specs, my wikis, my meeting notes, my technical documents, all of the papers that I've ever written into this database and be able to search those documents whenever I needed an answer. It freed my mind from being able to have to retain that at all times. It really became my personalized search engine. I could ask, what were the dependencies for the Q3 launch based on the engineering docs that I just uploaded 2 weeks ago? And I would get a concise answer instead of spending 3 days reading and looking through the documents. Like, it was literally there. It became this toolbar where I can just ask it questions and it would give me magical answers. And I really believe this tool was meant to solve organizational amnesia. The reality of implementing artificial intelligence at scale that the hype cycle 100% ignores. Because come here, AI is only as good as the data that you actually feed it. And corporate data is a disaster, to say the least. When we tried to actually implement RAG systems, we ran into walls because the documentation, the data that we had was fragmented, often contradictory, and even more crazy, often outdated. So you had wikis that were linked to other wikis that didn't exist, or 5 different documents that might give 5 different answers to the exact same question. Frustrating beyond all means. And the big lesson learned was that if you feed messy data into RAG systems, you get garbage out. Because the AI itself, it can't distinguish between the current strategy and a deprecated document from 2019. And the scary part was it would actually confidently present outdated information as facts. We realized that before we could actually implement any type of AI into our systems, we had to fix our data infrastructure, our documentation, and our culture. And that is a massive multi-year expense for an organization as large as Amazon. So it wasn't really a technical problem, it was a cultural and historical problem within the company itself. This gap between the promise of AI and the reality of corporate data is exactly why I believe the hype is actually crashing. And this brings us to right now. Because if you're reading the news, the excitement is actually fading. I don't know if you've probably heard of this, but there's something called the Gartner Hype Cycle. It tracks technology from the initial hype to the inevitable crash, and then to real productivity. And as of 2025, AI is right in the middle of what they call the Trough of Disillusionment. We're smack dab right there. And you're seeing it right now in the market. You're noticing that investments are actually cooling. You're getting a lot of noise about companies really not happy with the ROI of AI. And especially companies that rush to bolt AI onto their products or realizing that it's not really delivering any real value to its customers. And I'm talking about you, Apple, and your Apple Intelligence. Really hope you figure that out. So why the disillusionment? The disillusionment, in my humble opinion, is happening for three main reasons. The first is the data problem, which we just discussed. And companies are realizing that internal knowledge base is just too messy. And second is honestly cost. Because if you haven't read, running these models is incredibly expensive. And not just from a cost perspective, but from an environmental perspective as well. The compute costs for training and inference are astronomical. And companies are looking at the bill and asking, is this really worth it? And third, and in my experience, the most important, AI's got a trust issue. The technology is fundamentally flawed. It doesn't work as advertised. But let's do a healthy reality check here. The Trough of Disillusionment is actually a healthy phase. It forces us to move past the fantasy and focus on the real utility of the technology. But in order for us to do that, we really have to confront exactly why these billion-dollar models constantly fail. And funny enough, it's actually baked into their architecture. What I like to call AI sometimes, especially when I'm angry, is the confident liar. The biggest flaw in artificial intelligence is that it lies. And not only does it lie, it is constantly doing it, and it's convincing. It's very, very convincing. And we call these lies hallucinations. The AI generates outputs that look plausible, but is completely fabricated. And unfortunately, this isn't just an edge case. It's the fundamental feature of how large language models actually work. And some of the failures are spectacular. You probably have seen lawyers that have been fired for using ChatGPT to write briefs, only to find out that the AI system they use invented fake cases. And famously enough, Apple and Google have both released AI features that generated false news summaries or gave some type of dangerous advice. Glue on pizza might be tasty. So you may be asking yourself, why do they do this? Why does this happen? That's a fair question. It's really because LLMs are not truth machines. They are pattern predictors. They don't know facts. They just calculate statistics. They look at statistical probability of what word should come next. They are designed to sound fluent, but believe it or not to be accurate. And also, they are incentivized during training to provide a confident answer. So rather than say, I don't know, this leads to plausible fiction. And then there's the token problem. I'm just going to go over this part briefly because I don't want to bore the audience, but to understand this, you need to know about tokens. Because AI doesn't read words like we do. It breaks languages down into tiny little chunks called tokens. And let's take the word strawberry. You may have seen this across the interwebs, but you see the letters. The AI might just only see two tokens, straw and berry. The AI is just predicting the next token in the sequence. And this is why AI struggles with precision. Now, I have done this on numerous occasions without even realizing, but if you ask AI to count the letters in a word or perform precise math, it often fails. It's not calculating, it's predicting the language. So when you're asking it things like, I want to write a 10,000 character document, it doesn't actually count 10,000 characters. It counts what the estimated token would be for those characters and then writes. And oftentimes, if you take that information and put it inside a Word document and actually do a word or character count, it's going to be off significantly. If that information helps you, thank goodness, because that would have helped me a long time ago. Now let's talk about the black box and the danger zone. Here's a scary thing. The AI black box. We don't know how the AI actually arrives at its conclusions. The internal decision-making process is opaque, to say the least, and we can't audit its thought process. So the implications for enterprises that use this are massive. Because research actually shows that in specialized domains like law or medicine, hallucination rates can be as high as 30% or more. You cannot automate critical business processes with a technology that is wrong 30% of the time. Now, I'm not saying that AI is not a powerful assistant, but honestly, it can't be trusted with autonomy. So how do you actually use it effectively if you can't trust that it's giving you the right answer or that it's not lying to you? This is going to go a little bit beyond prompt engineering, but if you look for advice online, anything using AI, you'll find endless tutorials on prompt engineering, things like chain of thought, asking the AI to think step by step in a process. These are useful basic things that you can do with it. But in my professional context, that's not enough because you need a strategy for leveraging the power while managing the risk. And here's the advice playbook that I came up with for myself that may be useful for you. Let's talk about what I actually use, and this is kind of an editor-in-chief mindset, because you have to shift your mindset with how you use AI, in my opinion. You are no longer a writer, you are the editor-in-chief. You're the boss. The AI is your employee, it's a junior writer, and it generates the raw material. But your job is to direct the AI, to critique it, to verify it, and to synthesize. This means developing a strong filter for the language that it speaks. It's that generic, often polished, empty language that AI often produces. You have to force it into your own voice and ensure the substance is actually sound. In short, your value is no longer the ability to generate content, it's the ability to validate and elevate that content. And let's talk about cross-model validations. This is an important one. There are a lot of AI models that are out there, and I never rely on a single model because the models have different strengths and weaknesses. Even though we're starting to see those arcs diverge into one, my opinion is OpenAI is a great generalist. It's the Swiss Army knife of everything when you need for AI. Now, Claude and Anthropic is superior for summarizing long documents and coding and tends to be a little more cautious. There's a whole story behind that. But Gemini, the one that I actually use the most nowadays, it excels at multimodal tasks. But for any critical task, I want to make sure that I run that prompt through multiple models. And then I want to make sure that I compare the outputs. One of the big things that I do is just if the results diverge significantly, then that would be a massive red flag. And that to me would require deeper investigation. This comparison, those really reveal the weak points in the AI's reasoning. Now let's talk about building your own RAG system, the personal knowledge base. And this is where I think AI shines. Because we talked about how difficult enterprise RAG is because of the messy data. But a personal RAG, even though that sounds kind of weird, is actually incredibly powerful. You can use tools to build a personalized knowledge base. And this knowledge base can be grounded in your own notes, your own research, and your own documentations. This is stuff that you've created. This is what I did with the personas internally. And I can't tell you how much that alleviated a lot of the same repetitive questions that I would typically get, because curating your own data, you bypass the corporate data disaster. You create an assistant that is genuinely knowledgeable about your specific domain, your specific work. And this is the single highest leverage activity that you can do, in my opinion, with AI right now. To give kind of an overarching example, being able to take that data, that thing you've created, I would get a lot of repeat questions from customers that even if I put it in the fact page and launched it onto a wiki and say, go here, they still want to hear it from me. So being able to tie emails or Slack messages to the system that I created and have them answer that for me would have freed up 30 to 40% of my time working specifically on answering repeat questions. So creating that process to be able to eliminate repeat questions left me with more time to work on the bigger problems. But the one thing I can't stress enough is the human in the loop process. That has to be non-negotiable because AI should never be making the final authority on high stakes decisions. Now, I know people will put a lot of questions in there about a lot of different topics and say, what would you do? That is one thing that I have never done with AI because I don't trust it. I always assume the AI is wrong until it proves me right. And even that has to go through a verification check before I feel comfortable with the answer itself, which may even include involving other humans in my discussion. All right, so let's break this down and bring this all together. The answer to the ultimate question, will AI take your job? If your job consistently or entirely is repetitive, that low information processing, yeah, I think that your job is at risk. But the reality overall is complex because at environments like Amazon, AI is not replacing entire jobs at scale. But what it looked like it was replacing was tasks. And this is leading to a great restructuring of how we actually work. What we're seeing is something like the Jevons paradox. The Jevons paradox in economics. As technology makes something more efficient, we tend to consume more of it. As AI makes us more efficient at certain tasks, the expectations rise. If me as a PM can analyze data 10 times faster, they aren't working less, they are expected to analyze 10 times more data or spend the freed up time on higher level strategy. So in short, the bar is going up for everyone, and it compresses the time spent on execution. It is increasing the value of strategy and critical thinking. And then there's the AGI question. What exactly is AGI? Because right now we have Gen AI, but artificial general intelligence, the point where AI surpasses human intelligence. Now, this is the thing that I see all over from a hype cycle perspective. And I use AI, and probably a lot of you use AI in your daily task, but I can tell you from personal experience, from work experience, I am highly skeptical that we are anywhere near or close to that. I don't care what the experts say at this point, because you're seeing the practical applications, and maybe they know more than what we actually do and have access to information. But if what we have today is a general idea of what's coming tomorrow, then I don't see it happening. Not in the timescale that they're mentioning, or if at all. The current models are getting faster and cheaper, but they are still just pattern predictors. They lack context, judgment, and real-world understanding. They don't think. And I believe the future actually belongs to those who can navigate the chaos and leverage the tools. The one thing that I can say about working at Amazon is working through ambiguity, becoming a good problem solver, and thinking outside the box has set me up for success in trying to navigate this new environment of what AI is going to be doing for a lot of companies. Because the skill set, it's shifting. The value of hoarding knowledge, thankfully, is decreasing. The value of synthesizing information, making complex judgments, and communicating, especially communicating effectively, is increasing. The people who thrive in this environment will be the ones who adapt the editor-in-chief mindset. They will use AI to amplify the core human skills, because the Trough of Disillusionment, that part of the Gartner Hype Cycle, is here. I really believe the hype is dead or dying, and now is the time to adapt your skills. Understand the limitations of the technology and position yourself to be the strategist, not the automator or the automated. This is the reality that I'm seeing now, but I'm just curious. I want to know, what are y'all seeing? How is AI impacting your work in the real world? Are you seeing the disillusionment, or are you finding some real value in the use of AI? Make sure you drop your experiences in the comments below, and let's cut through the hype together. I really do appreciate everybody for joining today, and I hope you got a sense of what my thoughts are on it. And remember, these are just opinions. This is just my experience. If anybody has any questions, please drop them in the comment section. This is just to open the conversation. I have a lot of friends that are going through this right now and trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. And honestly, just like everybody else, I don't know. I have my thoughts. I have my opinions. I appreciate everybody watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your afternoon, day, year, whatever it is. See you on the next episode of The ARQIV.